When the rancher told me not to work past 4 p.m., I thought he was being superstitious. By 4:15, I understood. I took the contract in October of 2009, property boundary survey for a ranch outside Ballard, Utah. The client was a management company out of Salt Lake, and the pay was almost double my usual rate for what looked like straightforward work on paper. 1,600 acres, mostly flat terrain, existing fence lines to follow. They needed updated GPS coordinates for a property transfer. 3 days of work, maybe 4, if the weather turned. The rancher who managed the property met me at the gate on day 1. His name was Elliot, maybe 60 years old, with the kind of sun-darkened skin you get from decades outdoors. He didn't shake my hand when I introduced myself. "You the surveyor?" he asked. "That's right, Jason Webb. Should have the perimeter done by end of week." He looked at my truck, at the equipment cases in the bed, and back at me. "You work alone?" "Usually. Faster that way." Elliot shifted his weight, glanced back toward the ranch house about a quarter-mile up the drive. "Listen, I don't know what they told you in Salt Lake, but there's rules here. You work daylight only. You're off the property by 4 p.m. No exceptions. You don't go past the fence line, into the scrub. And if you see anything unusual, you leave it alone, and you tell me." I'd worked rural properties before. Sometimes ranchers got territorial about access, worried about liability or trespassing. "No problem," I said. "I'll stay on schedule. I'm serious about the 4 p.m. His voice was flat. "Not 4:30, not 4:15. 4 p.m. You're in your truck heading out." "Understood." He stepped aside and led me through the gate. The first 2 days went fine. The property was high desert scrubland, mostly sage and rabbit brush with cottonwoods along a seasonal creek bed. The existing fence was 3-strand barbed wire on cedar posts, older but maintained. I started at the southwest corner and worked my way north, setting up my theodolite every few hundred yards, taking readings, marking waypoints on my GPS unit. The cattle kept their distance. There were maybe 200 head scattered across the property, Herefords mostly. They'd watch me work from 100 yards out, then drift away when I moved to the next station. Normal enough. Cattle are curious but skittish. By the afternoon of day 2, I'd covered about half the western boundary. The fence ran straight for long stretches, following section lines, then jogged east where the property bordered BLM land. I was making good time. That's when I noticed the first odd thing. I was setting up at a fence corner, driving in a survey stake, when I saw another stake about 30 feet ahead. Bright orange plastic flag, exactly like the ones I used. I walked over to it. The stake was fresh, driven in maybe an inch deeper than I usually set them, but otherwise identical to mine. I checked my field notes. According to my map, I hadn't reached this spot yet. I pulled the stake, figured maybe I'd gotten turned around, marked my actual position, and kept working. Probably just fatigue. I'd been walking fence line for 6 hours, but then I found another one. This time, it was a full station setup. Someone had driven in a stake, piled 3 rocks next to it as a marker, and scratched coordinates in the dirt with a stick. The numbers were close to what my GPS showed off by maybe 15 feet. The dirt was still loose. I stood there looking at it for a long time. There was no one else on the property. I hadn't seen another vehicle. Elliot would have mentioned if another crew was scheduled. I took a photo, pulled the stake, and noted the location. Then I checked my watch. 3:40 p.m. Elliot's warning came back to me. 4 p.m., no exceptions. I packed up faster than usual and headed back to my truck. The sun was still well above the hills, plenty of light left, but something about finding those stakes had put an edge in my stomach. When I got back to the gate, Elliot was waiting in his own truck, engine running. "You're early," he said. "Found some survey markers I didn't place." I showed him the photo on my camera. "You have another crew out here recently?" He looked at the image for a long time. Then he handed the camera back. No, could be old markers, previous survey. Could be. He didn't sound convinced. You finished the section you were working? Most of it. I'll wrap the north end tomorrow. Remember the rules, he said, and drove off toward the house. That night, I went over my notes in the motel room. The coordinates I'd found scratched in the dirt matched my planned route almost exactly. Someone had surveyed the same fence line, probably within the last few days based on how fresh the disturbed soil looked. But the management company swore I was the first crew they'd hired in 3 years. Day 3 started the same. Clear sky, temperature in the low 50s, light wind from the west. I loaded my gear and drove out to where I'd stopped the previous afternoon. The section I needed to finish ran along the northern boundary, where the fence climbed a low ridge and followed the crest for about half a mile. I set up my first station at 8:30 a.m. The theodolite went on the tripod. I leveled it, took my backsight reading on the last known point. Everything standard. Then I heard my own voice. It came from the direction of the ridge, faint but clear. Someone calling out coordinates. My voice. My cadence. I stood there with my hand on the theodolite, listening. Station 47, reading north-northwest, angle 89 degrees. That was the exact call I'd made 10 minutes ago at my last setup. I looked toward the ridge. Nothing moved. The voice had come from maybe 300 yards out, past the fence line, in the scrubland. I waited, watching the brush. The voice called again. Same words, same reading, like a recording being played back. I checked my recorder. It was off. I hadn't been broadcasting anything. Hello? I called out. Silence. Then, after about 30 seconds, my own voice answered from the ridge. Hello. Same inflection. Same slight crack in the middle of the word where my voice always breaks when I'm projecting. I picked up my radio and keyed the mic. This is Jason Webb. If someone's out there, identify yourself. I waited. The radio hissed with static. Then my own voice came back through the speaker. This is Jason Webb. If someone's out there, identify yourself. Not through the radio. From the ridge. Spoken aloud. Perfectly timed. Like someone was standing up there with a recording of me from 2 seconds ago. I shut off the radio and stood there, breathing hard. The cattle that had been grazing about 50 yards to my left had all moved away. They were bunched up near the creek bed now, a tight group, all facing away from the ridge. I checked my watch. 9:20 a.m. More than 6 hours until 4 p.m. I decided to finish the section. I was a professional. I'd dealt with pranksters before, kids messing around on BLM land, hunters trying to spook people off property they wanted to use. Someone was out there screwing with me, and the best response was to ignore them and get the work done. I took my readings, marked my waypoints, moved up the fence line. At the next station, I found boot prints. They were in a patch of bare soil next to a fence post. Men's hiking boots, size 11, same as mine. Same tread pattern. I knelt down and put my own boot next to one of the prints. Perfect match. The prints led away from the fence, heading northeast into the scrub. I followed them with my eyes. They went in a straight line for about 40 feet, then stopped, just ended, like whoever made them had been lifted straight up into the air. I took another photo and kept working. By 11 a.m., I had reached the high point of the ridge. The fence ran along the top, and from here I could see most of the property spread out below. The ranch house to the south, the creek cutting east to west, the road leading out to the highway. My truck was visible as a small white rectangle about a mile back. That's when I saw him. There was a man standing on the next rise, maybe 400 yards north. He was wearing a blue jacket, jeans, orange vest, carrying what looked like a survey kit. He had his back to me, facing away, but something about his build, his posture, looked familiar. I raised my hand and waved. He raised his hand and waved. Same motion, same timing, exactly simultaneous. I lowered my hand. He lowered his hand. I took a step forward. He took a step forward. Then he turned around, and I saw his face. It was my face. Not similar, not a resemblance. My face, my jacket, my orange safety vest with the small tear on the left pocket where it had caught on barbed wire 2 months ago, my survey kit, my posture. We stood there looking at each other across 400 yards of scrubland. Then he started walking toward me. His gait was wrong, too smooth. No weight shift in the hips, no natural bounce in the step. He moved like something that had watched humans walk, but didn't quite understand the mechanics. Each step covered the same distance exactly, like he was on a track. I backed away from the fence. He kept coming, steady, not fast but not stopping. I had checked my watch. 11:20 a.m., 4.5 hours until 4 p.m. I grabbed my tripod and gear and started down the ridge toward my truck. When I looked back, the figure had reached the fence line. He stopped there, right at the wire, and stood watching me. He didn't climb over, didn't go around, just stood there with his hands at his sides. I kept walking. My truck was a mile away across open ground. I tried not to run. Running meant panic, and panic got you hurt in the back country. But I walked fast, gear rattling in my pack, breathing hard. Halfway to the truck, I looked back again. He was following, not on the same path. He was moving parallel to me, about 200 yards to the east, pacing me. When I stopped, he stopped. When I started again, he started. Always the same distance, never closer, never farther. I could see his face clearly now, even at this distance. My face, my expression, neutral, calm, professional, the way I look when I'm working. The cattle had all moved to the far western edge of the property. They were pressed against the fence there, packed tight, some of them making low distress sounds. I reached my truck at 11:50 a.m., threw my gear in the bed, climbed in the cab, locked the doors. My hands were shaking so hard I dropped the keys twice before getting them in the ignition. The figure was standing about 100 yards away now, just outside the fence line near where I'd started my survey that morning. Watching, waiting. I started the engine and put the truck in gear. As I pulled away, heading for the gate, he raised one hand, waved. I didn't wave back. Elliot was waiting at the gate again. This time, he got out of his truck and walked over to my window. "You're early," he said. "I'm done. I'm not coming back." He nodded slowly, like he'd expected this. "What did you see?" I told him. All of it. The stakes, the voice, the prints, the figure on the ridge. He listened without interrupting, his expression never changing. When I finished, he said, "Wait here." He walked back to his truck and pulled out a file folder, brought it over, and handed it through my window. Inside were photographs, 5 of them, different people, different years based on the photo quality and clothing, but the same composition in each shot. A person standing on the ridge in survey gear, and in the background another figure. Same posture, same clothing, same person, duplicated. The most recent photo was dated 2006. "You're the 6th surveyor the management company sent," Elliot said. "None of them finished. One of them, guy named Patterson, he tried to stay past 4 p.m., said he wasn't going to let superstition run him off a job." "What happened?" "We found him at the gate at 4:30, sitting in his truck, engine running, doors locked. He wouldn't talk, wouldn't get out. Sheriff's deputy had to break the window. Patterson was just sitting there, staring straight ahead. He spent 2 days in the hospital in Roosevelt, then checked himself out and drove back to California. Management company got a letter from his lawyer saying he'd experienced a mental health crisis and couldn't complete the contract. Elliot took the folder back. The thing is, his survey was finished. Every marker placed, every coordinate recorded, all his equipment packed and staged at the gate. He said he didn't do it. Said he doesn't remember anything after 3 p.m. I looked back toward the property. The figure was gone. Just empty scrubland, fence line, distant cattle. What is it? I asked. I don't know. I've managed this property for 12 years, and I don't know. What I do know is the rules work. Daylight only, off by 4 p.m., don't cross the fence line. You follow those rules, nothing follows you home. I put the truck in gear. I'm not putting this in my report. I know. He stepped back from the window. The management company will call you in a few days. Ask why you didn't finish. Tell them whatever you want. Equipment failure, scheduling conflict, doesn't matter. They'll hire someone else. And the same thing will happen. Probably. I drove out through the gate. In my rearview mirror, I saw Elliot close it behind me and lock the chain. He stood there watching until I reached the highway. I never went back. The management company called 4 times. I told them I'd had a family emergency and couldn't complete the contract. They threatened to withhold payment for the 2 days I'd worked. I told them to keep it. 3 months later, I got a call from a surveyor named Tim Hodges. He said he'd been hired to finish a boundary survey near Ballard and found my name in the previous contractor files. He wanted to know if I had any notes or coordinates I could share to save him setup time. I told him I didn't have anything useful. Then I told him about the 4 p.m. rule. He laughed, said he'd worked ranches all over Utah and never let local superstition dictate his schedule. I didn't argue, just said, if a rancher tells you to be off the property by a certain time, listen, that's the rule. He thanked me and hung up. I don't know if he finished that survey. I never followed up, but I'll tell you this. If you're working a remote property and someone gives you a time restriction, take it seriously. And if you ever see your own survey markers ahead of you on a line you haven't walked yet, turn around. Don't wait to find out who placed them. Some boundaries aren't meant to be measured. If this story kept you up at night, there are hundreds more like it on the channel. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and check the playlist in the description for more Skinwalker Ranch encounters. Until next time, stay safe out there. The irrigation pump died at midnight. I should have waited until morning. I'd been working at the ranch for 3 weeks when it happened, November of 2014. I was hired as seasonal maintenance, mostly equipment repair and fence work. The pay was decent, and the ranch manager, a guy named Virgil, didn't micromanage. Show up, do the work, go home. Simple. The property was about 1,400 acres outside Fort Duchesne, Utah. Cattle operation, some hay production, a few outbuildings scattered across the property. I stayed in a trailer on the south end, about 2 miles from the main ranch house. The job came with housing, which is why I took it. I was saving money, planning to buy my own place by spring. Virgil had 3 rules, and he made them clear on day 1. You work daylight hours unless it's an emergency, he said. You radio in before you go anywhere off the main roads, and you don't mess with anything you find that doesn't belong to the operation. Tools, equipment, supplies that aren't ours. You leave them and you tell me. I asked what constituted an emergency. Fire, flood, injured animal, structural failure that poses immediate danger. He looked at me hard. Broken equipment is not an emergency. It can wait until morning. Fair enough. I'd worked ranches before where managers got particular about after dark work, usually liability concerns or insurance requirements. I didn't push it. The pump that died was on the northeast irrigation line, about 1.5 miles from my trailer. It fed 3 stock tanks and a section of pasture. Not critical, but the cattle used those tanks, and with temperatures dropping into the 30s at night, I didn't want them without water for long. It quit at midnight exactly. I know because I was awake doing paperwork in the trailer when the pressure alarm went off on the monitoring panel. The system was automated, set up to alert if any pump lost pressure for more than 5 minutes. I radioed the main house. No answer. Virgil lived there with his wife, but they were heavy sleepers, and the house was big. I tried twice more, then checked the monitoring screen. Pump 7, northeast quadrant, 0 pressure, 0 flow. I looked out the trailer window. Clear night, half moon, good visibility. The pump was a straight shot up the access road, maybe 20 minutes on the ATV. I could have it running again in an hour, probably just a clogged intake or trip breaker. I told myself it qualified as an emergency. Cattle without water, freezing temperatures. Virgil would understand. I loaded my toolbox onto the ATV, grabbed a headlamp and the big rechargeable spotlight, and headed out at 12:15 a.m. The access road was gravel, well maintained, easy to follow even in low light. The ATV headlights cut a clean path through the scrubland. I could see the pump house from about a quarter-mile out, a small cinder block structure with a metal roof painted white. The exterior light was on a sodium vapor lamp that cast everything in yellow-orange. I parked next to the structure and killed the engine. The silence came down hard. No wind, no cattle sounds, just the faint hum of the light fixture. I grabbed my tools and the spotlight and walked to the pump house door. It was unlocked. Standard practice. These remote pump stations weren't secured unless they contained expensive equipment. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The pump was a 2-horsepower submersible running off a dedicated breaker panel. I checked the panel first. All breakers in the on position. No trip switches. I grabbed my multimeter and tested the voltage. Clean power, no fluctuations. So it wasn't electrical. I knelt down next to the access hatch for the sump. The pump sat in a concrete well about 8 feet deep, pulling water from an underground line fed by a spring 2 miles west. I unbolted the hatch cover and shone my spotlight down into the well. The water level was normal, about 3 feet from the top. The pump housing was visible just below the surface. I could see the intake screen. It looked clear. I was reaching for the manual override switch when I heard the cattle. They were calling out in distress. Multiple animals close by. That panic glowing sound they make when something's wrong. I stepped outside and scanned the pasture with my spotlight. Nothing. The pasture was empty. The nearest cattle were in the south section, more than a mile away, and I would have heard the ATV driving over if they'd moved. But the sound continued. Definitely cattle. Definitely close. Coming from the direction of the stock tanks about 200 yards north of the pump house, I walked toward the tanks, following the sound. My spotlight beam swept across the access road, the fence line, the empty pasture. The distress calls got louder as I approached. Then they stopped. Complete silence. I stood there next to the first stock tank, listening. The water in the tank was still reflecting the moonlight. No movement, no cattle. I radioed the main house again. Virgil, this is Kyle. Do you copy? Static, then copy, Kyle. What's your status? The voice was Virgil's. Same cadence, same slight rasp from years of smoking, but something was off. The words came a half second too slow, like someone reading from a script. I'm at pump 7, I said. Pressure alarm went off. I'm on site now, checking the system. Silence. Then I'm at pump 7. Pressure alarm went off. I'm on site now, checking the system. My own voice, my exact words, coming through the radio. I pulled the radio away from my ear and stared at it. The transmission light was off. I wasn't broadcasting. Virgil, I said. No response. I clipped the radio back to my belt and turned back toward the pump house. That's when I saw the footprints. They were in the dirt access road, illuminated by my spotlight beam. Boot prints, men's work boots, size 12, same size I wore, same tread pattern, my boots. The prints led from the ATV past the pump house toward the stock tanks where I was standing. I followed them with the spotlight. They traced my exact path, every step I'd taken since I arrived, but they continued past where I was standing. The prints kept going, heading north into the scrubland, disappearing into the darkness beyond my light. I walked forward slowly, following them. They went in a straight line for maybe 50 yards, then curved back toward the access road. I found where they ended. There was a second set of tracks there, parked parallel to mine, ATV tracks. Same tire pattern, same wheelbase as the ranch's fleet. Someone had driven out here, parked in the exact spot I would park, walked the exact route I would walk, then driven away. The tire tracks headed back south toward my trailer. I checked my watch. 12:40 a.m. I'd been on site for 25 minutes. I got back on the radio. Virgil, this is Kyle. I need you to confirm your location. Static. Then my own voice came back. Virgil, this is Kyle. I need you to confirm your location. I turned off the radio. The pump house light flickered. I looked back at the building. The door was open, exactly as I'd left it. But now there was another light inside, a headlamp beam moving back and forth. Someone was in there, working on the pump. I hadn't left my headlamp on. I approached slowly, toolbox in one hand, spotlight in the other. The beam from inside swung across the interior walls, steady, methodical. I could hear tools being set down, metal on concrete. I stopped at the doorway and looked inside. There was a man kneeling next to the pump access hatch. He was wearing work clothes, canvas jacket, tool belt. His headlamp was identical to mine. Same brand, same model. He had his back to me, focused on the pump. Hey, I said. He didn't turn around, just kept working. I could hear him muttering to himself, running through a diagnostic checklist. My voice, my checklist. The same words I'd been thinking 5 minutes ago. Breaker's good, voltage is clean, intake looks clear, probably the impeller. I backed away from the door. My hands were shaking. The spotlight beam jumped across the ground. The figure inside stood up and turned around. I ran. I made it to the ATV in maybe 10 seconds, threw the toolbox in the cargo rack, hit the ignition. The engine caught on the first try. I slammed it into gear and accelerated down the access road, not looking back. Behind me, I heard another engine start. I pushed the ATV as fast as it would go on the gravel road, 40 miles per hour, the headlights bouncing over ruts and rocks. In my mirror, I could see another set of headlights following, same distance, same speed, not gaining, not falling back. The road curved east, following the fence line. I knew this section. About a mile ahead, there was a cattle guard where the access road met the main ranch road. Steel grate over a concrete pit, designed to keep cattle from crossing. The ATVs could drive over it, but it made a distinctive sound, a loud rattling bang as the tires hit the metal. I watched my mirror as I approached the cattle guard. The headlights behind me maintained their distance. I hit the cattle guard at 35 miles per hour. The ATV bucked and rattled, tires drumming across the steel grate. The sound echoed across the empty pasture. I looked in the mirror. The headlights behind me had stopped. They sat there on the other side of the cattle guard, idling, not moving, just waiting. I kept driving. The main ranch road was better maintained, smoother, faster. I covered the 2 miles to my trailer in under 5 minutes. Every time I checked the mirror, the road behind me was empty. I parked the ATV next to the trailer and killed the engine. The property was silent. No cattle sounds, no wind, just the faint buzz of the trailer's exterior light. My toolbox was gone from the cargo rack. I stood there staring at the empty rack. I'd thrown the toolbox in before I started the engine. I'd heard it hit the metal. Now it was gone. I went inside the trailer and locked the door. All three locks. Handle, deadbolt, chain. I checked every window. All secure. Then I sat at the small kitchen table and waited. At 3:20 a.m., I saw headlights through the window. An ATV pulled up next to mine and parked. The engine shut off. I heard boots on gravel, footsteps approaching the trailer. They stopped at the door. Someone tried the handle. It rattled but held. Then I heard my own voice outside. Virgil, this is Kyle. I'm back at the trailer. Pump 7 is operational. No issues found. Silence. Then the sound of boots walking away. The ATV engine started. Headlights swept across the trailer windows as it turned around and drove back toward the pump house. I didn't move until sunrise. At 6 a.m., I radioed Virgil, the real Virgil. He answered immediately. Sounded like he'd just woken up. What's going on? He asked. I told him everything. The alarm, the pump, the footprints, the cattle guard. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, there was a long silence. Then, stay where you are. I'm coming down. He arrived 20 minutes later in his truck. I met him outside. He looked tired, older than usual. Show me the ATV, he said. We walked over to it. He examined the cargo rack, the tires, the fuel gauge. Then he walked a slow circle around both ATVs, mine and the ranch vehicle I'd used. This isn't the one you took last night, he said. What? He pointed at the serial number plate on the frame. This is ATV 4. You would have taken ATV 2. It's the one assigned to your trailer. That's impossible. I took this one. I drove it back here. He pulled out his phone and made a call. I heard him ask someone to check the equipment shed. He waited, then thanked them, and hung up. ATV 2 is parked in the shed. Engine's cold. Hasn't been driven in at least 12 hours. We stood there in the early morning light, looking at the ATV. I'd definitely driven home. Virgil walked to his truck and came back with a clipboard. I need you to write down everything that happened. Times, locations, what you saw, everything. I wrote it all out. When I finished, he took the clipboard and added it to a file folder he pulled from behind the truck seat. The folder was thick, maybe 40 pages. What is that? I asked. Incident reports, previous ranch hands, contractors, delivery drivers, things that happened after dark. He flipped through the pages. You're the first one who made it past the cattle guard. What do you mean? Most people who see it, they panic, drive off-road, get stuck, sometimes get hurt. We find them in the morning, usually hypothermic, sometimes injured. They never remember what they were running from. And the ones who don't panic? Virgil closed the folder. We had a guy 2 years ago, equipment operator named Torres. He stayed calm when he saw his double, tried to talk to it, figure out what it was. Sheriff found his truck at the pump house at dawn. Engine running, doors locked. Torres was in the driver's seat. He wouldn't speak, wouldn't respond. They took him to the hospital in Vernal, psychiatric hold, for 72 hours. Did he ever explain what happened? No, he checked himself out and drove to Arizona. His family said he won't talk about Utah. I looked back at the trailer, at the locked door, the windows. I'd checked 3 times during the night. Why didn't you warn me? I asked. Would you have believed me? I didn't have an answer for that. Virgil started back toward his truck. You've got 2 choices. You can finish out your contract, work daylight only, follow the rules, or you can leave today, full pay for the time you worked, no questions asked. I thought about it for maybe 5 seconds. I'll leave. He nodded. Pack your things. I'll have your check ready by noon. I loaded my truck in under an hour. Clothes, tools, personal items. I didn't take anything that belonged to the ranch. Before I left, Virgil came down one more time. He handed me the check through the truck window, then passed me a small notebook. This is a logbook. he said. Every ranch hand for the last 8 years. Phone numbers, current addresses, where I could find them. If you ever need to talk to someone who'll understand what you saw, call one of them. I took the notebook. Do they all have stories like mine? Most of them. I put the truck in gear. What is it, Virgil? What's out there? He stepped back from the window. I don't know, but I know the rules work. Daylight only. Radio check-ins. Don't cross the cattle guard after dark. You follow those rules, it stays on its side. I drove out through the main gate and didn't look back. 2 weeks later, I got a call from a guy named Sam Porter. He said Virgil had given him my number. Porter had worked the ranch in 2012, left after he saw something at the hay barn one night. We talked for an hour. His story was different in details, but the same in structure. Something that looked like him followed him, stopped at a boundary. The thing that got me, Porter said, is it knew things. My diagnostic process, my tool preferences, the exact order I do tasks, like it had been watching me, learning. Did it ever cross the boundary? I asked. No. And that's the strangest part. Whatever it has rules too. It won't cross running water, won't cross iron, won't cross into buildings with metal frames. Virgil figured that out years ago. That's why the cattle guard works. That's why the equipment shed is steel framed. That's why he tells everyone to stick to the main buildings after dark, so it's contained. As long as you know the boundaries, Porter said. But if you don't, if you're out there alone when it decides to show up, there's nothing stopping it from walking right up to you. I thanked him and hung up. I still have the logbook. 16 names, 16 stories. I've never gone back to that property, and I never will. But I'll tell you this. If you're working remote ranch land and equipment fails after dark, let it fail. Wait until morning, and if anyone ever tells you about a cattle guard or a fence line or a creek bed you shouldn't cross after sunset, believe them. Some repairs aren't worth making. 3 days into the dig, we found something that had already been excavated. We weren't the ones who dug it up. I was a graduate student at Utah State in the summer of 2017, working on my thesis in archaeological anthropology. My advisor, Dr. Grant Holloway, had secured a permit for a limited survey on private land near Fort Duchesne. The property was adjacent to known Fremont culture sites, and the landowner had agreed to let us do a preliminary assessment before selling to a development company. We had 6 weeks, a small crew, and a tight research question. Document any surface artifacts and subsurface features that might indicate seasonal occupation by pre-contact indigenous groups. Standard academic work. I'd done 3 previous field schools. This should have been routine. The property was about 800 acres, mostly scrubland with seasonal water sources. The landowner, a man named Kendrick, met us at the gate on day 1. It was maybe 70, sun-weathered, with the deliberate movements of someone who'd spent his life working outdoors. You're the archaeology people, he said. Not a question. Dr. Holloway introduced our team, himself, me, and 2 undergrads, Rachel and Aaron. 4 people, 1 truck, surveying equipment, excavation tools, camping gear. Kendrick looked us over. How long you planning to be out here each day? Daylight hours, Dr. Holloway said. We'll start around 7 a.m., work until 5 or 6 p.m., depending on conditions. Good. I need you off the property by sunset. No exceptions. Dr. Holloway frowned. The permit allows us access until 9 p.m. We might need the extra time if we find something significant. Permit says whatever it says. I'm telling you, Sunset, that's the rule. There was a long pause. Dr. Holloway was used to negotiating site access, managing landowner concerns. Usually it came down to liability or privacy issues. We can work with that, he said finally. Is there a particular area you'd like us to avoid? No, just be off by sunset. Kendrick handed Dr. Holloway a key on a carabiner. Gate lock. When you're done for the day, lock it behind you. And if you find anything unusual, anything that doesn't look like old artifacts or natural features, you leave it and you tell me before you touch it. Unusual how? You'll know it when you see it. He drove away in an old Ford truck, leaving us standing at the gate. We set up base camp about a quarter mile in, near a dry wash that would have been a reliable water source historically. The first 2 days went perfectly. We established a survey grid, walked transects, cataloged surface artifacts, lithic scatter, ceramic sherds. Nothing spectacular, but consistent with Fremont occupation. Rachel and Aaron were diligent, Dr. Holloway was pleased, and I was accumulating good data for my thesis. On day 3, we started subsurface testing. The protocol was standard. Excavate 1 meter square test units at designated grid points, document soil stratigraphy, screen all soil, record and bag any artifacts. We'd planned 12 test units across the site. I started the first unit at grid point north 40, east 20. The soil was sandy loam, easy to dig, well drained. I got down about 30 centimeters when I hit a lens of darker soil, cultural layer, probably. I switched to a trowel, working slowly, brushing away soil to expose whatever was there. That's when I found the first tool. It was a Marshalltown trowel, 4-inch blade, wooden handle, exactly like the one I was using. But this one was half buried in the soil I was excavating, blade down, like someone had been using it and just left it there. I pulled it out and examined it. The handle had initials carved into it. K. M. Not mine, not anyone on our team. I called Dr. Holloway over. He looked at the trowel, turned it over in his hands. Could be from a previous survey. Kendrick said no one's been out here. That's why we got the permit. Could be old. Previous landowner, maybe amateur collectors. The trowel wasn't old. The wood wasn't weathered. The blade wasn't rusted. It looked like it had been used yesterday. We bagged it as a modern contaminant, and I kept digging. By the end of day 3, we'd completed 4 test units. 3 of them had yielded the expected results: charcoal, fire-cracked rock, occasional flakes, and sherds. But the 4th unit, the one Rachel had excavated at grid point north 60, east 40, had produced something else. She'd found a Ziploc bag. It was buried at 45 centimeters depth, sealed, containing a handwritten note and a set of Polaroid photographs. The note was on standard field notebook paper, written in pencil. It said, "Stopped excavation at 60 cm. Cultural layer continues. Recommend full unit. Grid point N 60E40. Date July 19th, 2017. Initials RC." Today's date was July 19th, 2017. Rachel's initials were RC, Rachel Chen. We all stood around the test unit, looking at the bag. Rachel's face had gone white. "I didn't write that," she said. Dr. Holloway opened the bag carefully, using gloves. He pulled out the photographs. There were 3 of them. Standard archaeological documentation shots, profile view of an excavation unit, plan view showing artifacts in situ, close-up of a ceramic vessel. The unit in the photos was Rachel's unit. Same location, same soil profile, same artifacts. But the excavation was deeper than what she'd dug. The photo showed 60 centimeters of depth. Rachel had only reached 45, and in the close-up photo, visible in the bottom of the unit, was a complete ceramic vessel that we hadn't found yet. Dr. Holloway checked the exposed soil at the bottom of Rachel's unit. "There's definitely more here. We need to keep going." "Should we?" I asked. "This is someone else's documentation. Someone who excavated this exact unit. There's no one else permitted on this site. We're the only crew. And how did this get here?" He didn't have an answer. We decided to stop work for the day. It was 4 p.m., plenty of time to pack up and clear the site before sunset. We covered the test units with tarps, loaded the tools into the truck, and headed for the gate. That's when Aaron noticed his field notebook was missing. "I had it this morning," he said. "I was recording coordinates at the base camp. I must have left it there." We drove back to base camp. The notebook wasn't where Aaron had left it. We searched the area, checked the truck, looked through all our gear. Nothing. "We'll find it tomorrow," Dr. Holloway said. "Let's get out of here." We locked the gate behind us and drove to the motel in Roosevelt, about 40 minutes west. Over dinner, we talked through what we'd found. The trowel, the buried documentation, the missing notebook. Dr. Holloway was convinced there was a rational explanation. Previous survey that Kendrick didn't know about. Some kind of archival mix-up. But Rachel wasn't buying it. "The date on that note is today's date," she said. "And those are my initials. Someone documented work I haven't done yet." "Coincidence," Dr. Holloway said, "and the trowel with initials K, M, could be anyone." I didn't say anything, for I was thinking about the way the trowel had been positioned in the soil, laid down, like it had been in active use when someone put it there. And I was thinking about the Polaroid photos, the way they showed future work we hadn't completed. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the ceramic vessel in the photo, still buried in Rachel's unit. If we excavated down to 60 centimeters tomorrow, would we find it exactly where the photo showed it? And if we did, what did that mean? Day 4 started the same. We arrived at the gate at 7 a.m., unlocked it, drove to base camp. Aaron's notebook was sitting on the folding table where we kept the equipment, open to a page of GPS coordinates. Aaron swore he'd searched that table the day before. We walked to Rachel's unit and pulled back the tarp. The unit was exactly as we'd left it, excavated to 45 centimeters. Dr. Holloway decided we should continue the excavation, document the vessel if we found it, and then decide what to do about the anomalous documentation. Rachel worked carefully, troweling away soil 1 centimeter at a time. At 50 centimeters, she hit a soil change, darker matrix, more compact. At 55 centimeters, she exposed the top of something rounded and smooth, ceramic. By 10 a.m., she'd fully exposed a complete Fremont grayware jar, medium-sized, intact, sitting upright in the soil, exactly where the Polaroid photo had shown it. Dr. Holloway photographed it from every angle. The vessel matched the photo perfectly. Same size, same position, same cracks in the rim. "This doesn't make sense," he said. I was looking at the photo again, comparing it to the real excavation. That's when I noticed something in the background of the close-up shot. There was a boot print in the soil next to the unit, partially visible at the edge of the frame. I walked around to that side of the unit. There was a boot print there, fresh, clear, pressed into the soil. And I put my own boot next to it, same size, same tread pattern, my boots. But I hadn't been standing there. I'd been on the opposite side of the unit all morning, taking notes. "Dr. Holloway," I said. He came over and looked at the print, then at my boots, then back at the print. "Stay here," he said. He walked to the truck and came back with a camera. He photographed the boot print, then had me place my boot next to it for scale. Perfect match. "When did you stand here?" he asked. I didn't. We worked in silence for the next hour. Rachel finished documenting the vessel. We photographed everything in situ, and then we carefully removed the jar and packed it for transport. Standard procedure. By the book, but none of us were talking about the boot print, or the trowel, or the buried documentation. We just worked. At 1 p.m., I started a new test unit at Grid Point, North 80, East 60. The soil was similar to the other units, sandy loam, some gravel inclusions, dry. I got down about 20 centimeters when I hit something hard. I brushed away the soil carefully. It was a metal clipboard, standard field equipment, aluminum frame, spring-loaded clip. There was paper attached to it. I pulled the clipboard out of the soil and wiped off the dirt. The paper was a field form, partially filled out. The handwriting was mine. The form documented a test unit at grid point, north 80, east 60. This unit, the one I was currently excavating. The form showed I'd dug to 70 centimeters and found a hearth feature with charcoal and fire-cracked rock. The date at the top of the form said July 20th, 2017. Tomorrow's date. My hands were shaking. I stood up and backed away from the unit. Dr. Holloway. He came over. I showed him the clipboard. He read the form twice, then looked at me. Is this your handwriting? Yes. Did you fill this out? No. He checked the date, checked his watch. Then he looked at the test unit, at the soil I'd excavated. We need to call Kendrick, he said. We packed up immediately, covered the units, loaded the gear, drove to the gate. Dr. Holloway called Kendrick from his cell phone, explained what we'd found. Kendrick listened without interrupting. Then he said, I'll be there in 20 minutes. We waited at the gate. Rachel and Aaron sat in the truck. Dr. Holloway paced next to the fence line. I stood there holding the clipboard, looking at my own handwriting, documenting work I hadn't done. Kendrick arrived in his Ford truck. He got out slowly, like his joints hurt, and walked over to Dr. Holloway. Show me, he said. We drove back to the base camp and walked to the test units. Kendrick looked at each one, then at the clipboard I was holding. This happened to anyone else? He asked. Dr. Holloway told him about the trowel, the buried photos, the boot print. Kendrick nodded like he'd expected this. You're the fourth crew, he said. University of Utah sent a team in 2012. BLM archaeologists came in 2014. Private cultural resource firm in 2016. All of them found the same things. Documentation they didn't create, tools that weren't theirs, evidence of excavations that hadn't happened yet. Why didn't you tell us? Dr. Holloway asked. Would you have believed me? No one answered. Kendrick walked to the truck and pulled out a file box from behind the seat. He opened it and spread the contents on the tailgate. Permits, field forms, photographs, reports, all from previous archaeological surveys on this property. The University of Utah team found a field notebook buried in a test unit, Kendrick said. The notebook belonged to their crew chief. It documented 2 weeks of excavation they hadn't done yet. Every unit, every artifact, every measurement. The crew chief said he'd never written it, but the handwriting was his. They left the next day, never came back. He pulled out another set of documents. BLM team found their own equipment staged at test units they hadn't excavated yet. Trowels, brushes, screens, all set up like someone had been using them. They thought someone was messing with them, maybe trespassing at night. They put up a game camera to catch whoever it was. He showed us a photo printout from a trail camera. Night shot, infrared. It showed a person kneeling at a test unit, excavating. The person was wearing BLM field gear. The timestamp said 3 a.m. That's one of their crew, Kendrick said. But he swore he wasn't out here at night. Said he was in the motel, asleep. They checked the motel security footage. He was there, in his room. Same time the camera caught him out here. Dr. Holloway took the photo, examined it closely. This is manipulated. Maybe. BLM didn't think so. They sent the camera and the memory card to their tech division. Analysis came back clean. No evidence of tampering. Then what is it? I asked. Kendrick collected the documents and put them back in the box. I don't know, but I know it escalates the longer you're here. First few days, you find small things. Tools, notes, and then you start finding documentation of future work. Then you see yourselves. The university team, one of their students claimed she saw herself working at a test unit that was a quarter mile from where she actually was. She walked over to investigate. When she got there, the figure was gone, but the unit was excavated exactly how she would have dug it, tools laid out exactly how she arranged her workspace. Where's that student now? Psychiatric treatment facility in Salt Lake. Checked herself in 3 days after leaving the site. I talked to her advisor. He said she couldn't stop talking about seeing herself in two places, about finding her own field notes, describing conversations she hadn't had yet. She was convinced she was losing time, that hours were passing without her awareness. We stood there in silence. The sun was past its zenith, shadows lengthening across the site. I need you to make a choice, Kendrick said. You can leave now. Keep the data you've collected, write up what you found, and I'll get you a full permit waiver. Or you can stay and finish the survey. But if you stay, understand that it's going to get worse, and I can't guarantee what condition you'll be in when you leave. Dr. Holloway looked at Rachel and Aaron, then at me. We should put it to a vote. I'm leaving, Rachel said immediately. Same, Aaron said. Dr. Holloway turned to me. Kyle, I looked at the test units, at the tarps covering work that had apparently already been documented, at the clipboard in my hands with tomorrow's date and my own handwriting. I'm done, I said. We packed everything in under an hour, filled in the test units, broke down the base camp, loaded the truck. Kendrick watched from his truck, engine running. Before we left, Dr. Holloway walked over to Kendrick's window. What happens to this site? The artifacts, the features we documented? Nothing, Kendrick said. Development company's going to level it, build a subdivision. They know about the archaeology. They don't care. They've got the cultural clearance they need. And the phenomenon? The things we found? If it's tied to the land, the bulldozers will take care of it. If it's not, Kendrick shrugged, then it's someone else's problem. We drove out through the gate. Dr. Holloway locked it behind us and handed me the key. Drop this in the mail to Kendrick when we get back to Logan. We drove in silence for about 10 miles. Then Rachel said, I want to see that clipboard. I handed it back to her. She read through the field form, the notes I'd supposedly written. Kyle, it says here you found a hearth at 70 centimeters, only dug to 20. But if someone dug that unit tonight after we left and excavated it to 70 centimeters, would they find a hearth? I'd been wondering the same thing. I don't know. Dr. Holloway glanced at me in the rearview mirror. We're not going back to find out. We didn't. We drove straight to Logan, dropped Rachel and Aaron at their dorms, and Dr. Holloway told me to take a few days off. He'd handle the permit closure, write up the incident for the landowner, and figure out what to report to the university. 3 days later, he called me. Kendrick sent me something. What? Photos. Someone excavated your test unit, the one you started on the last day. When, night of July 20th, trail camera caught it. He emailed me the photos. They showed a figure in field clothes, kneeling at the test unit, excavating by headlamp. The excavation was deep, maybe 70 centimeters. At the bottom, visible in the camera flash, was a circular arrangement of fire-cracked rock, a hearth, exactly as described on the field form I'd found. The figure in the photo was me, my build, my clothes, my headlamp, but the timestamp said 2 a.m., July 21st. I was in my apartment in Logan at that time. I'd been there all night. Dr. Holloway and I never talked about it again. He filed a closure report with the university citing unforeseen circumstances and withdrew our permit application. The development company leveled the site in October. As far as I know, nothing unusual happened during construction. But I still have that clipboard, and sometimes, late at night, I take it out and look at the field form, at my own handwriting, documenting work I never did. and measurements and observations that turned out to be completely accurate. I never finished my thesis, changed my focus to museum studies, got a job cataloging collections in Provo, indoor work, documented objects, nothing that requires field work. And I'll tell you this, if you're ever doing archaeological work on remote property and you find your own documentation buried in your excavation, stop. Don't try to rationalize it. Don't try to verify it. Just pack up and leave. Some sites document themselves.